If you clicked on this video, you probably heard the idea that buying a condo can help with your retirement. Maybe it's the idea of just buying one condo and letting it grow and compound. Or perhaps it's the idea of having a second property that you can flip or rent out for passive income. But is this the right move, and why does it seem like everyday Singaporeans are all doing this? And the question is, should you be doing the same? In the past, when it came to investing, Singaporeans gravitated towards three things: condos, fixed deposits, and insurance. But is this mindset still relevant today? Yes, property and condos did incredibly well in the past. Prices rose steadily and many people made strong returns which helped them in their retirement. But today the market is at an all-time high. What worked in the last few decades may not necessarily work in the next one. So if that's the case, what might then be a better approach? In this video, I'll break down 3 reasons why property became the default retirement plan for many everyday Singaporeans. And we'll also explore what are some other alternatives that you can consider. Stay till the end where I also talk about some other viewpoints, especially if you're not convinced that a condo is the best idea for your retirement plan. The first reason is simple. Our CPF and condos are tightly linked. Many people use a large portion of their CPF, OA or ordinary account to pay for their homes. So their homes then naturally become the largest part of their retirement savings. And over time, we've come to see our home or condo both as a home as well as an investment. Besides housing, education, and a few investment options that we'll talk about later, there isn't much else one can do with CPF OA funds. Therefore, in order to understand why so many Singaporeans are using their condos as a retirement plan, we first need to understand how much actually gets stuck in this CPF OA account. Each month, salaried employees contribute around 20% of their income to CPF, with employers adding up to an additional 17%, depending on the age of the worker. All in all, that's around 37% in total. Now, assuming an average salary of around 5,000 and under the age of 55, that means around 1,800 goes into the CPF monthly, with around 1.1k going directly into the OA. For a couple, that's around 2.2k combined into their OA every month, enough to cover their HDB installment. For instance, a 600k HDB flat comes with a monthly installment of around $2,000, almost exactly matching the couple's CPF OA contributions with a bit to spare. For those earning more, any additional that comes into their CPF OA account gets stuck and may then push them to consider upgrading or maybe even going for a second property. Since the CPF OA earns just 2.5% interest, many people prefer to use it for housing rather than to leave it idle, especially if they are earning more. Yes, there are other options such as investing your CPF OA funds through the CPFIS or CPF investment scheme. But as you see later on, property still appears more attractive to many people. So now that we understand why so much of our funds get locked into property through CPF, the next question is, why are people so confident that it would actually pay off? Therefore, in order to understand why so many people rely on their condo as a retirement plan, we now need to understand why they think it will do better than other investments. If you're new here, my name is Daryl, and in this channel we talk about real estate in Singapore. If you're interested in this video, then you may also be interested in my other videos where I cover the differences between stocks and real estate, which of the two makes more in the long term, and what makes a good location for a condo investment. So remember to like and subscribe if you want more such unbiased property videos. The second reason why many Singaporeans use condos as their retirement plan is simple. Condos have done well over the years, and in the minds of Singaporeans, it has a very strong track record. From the 2000s to 2010s, property prices were rising quickly, sometimes 4 to 6% per year. And with leverage, those returns could be even higher. Interest rates are low, the population was growing, and the land is limited story was true enough to keep the demand strong. But beyond just rising demand and limited land, another key reason why condos in Singapore performed so well was the economic growth and stability. During those years, the country attracted major foreign investment, expanded its financial sector, and saw incomes rise steadily. As people became wealthier and more confident about their future, upgrading from a HDB to a condo both became the logical next move, as well as a status symbol. This consistent demand across all income groups helped to push the price up year after year. Beyond just the individual, government policies also had a large role to play in this. As mentioned earlier, the CPF system made it easier for Singaporeans to channel their savings into property. But it goes further than that. Each time a new MRT line or shopping centre opened, property prices around the area climbed up. Urban redevelopment in places like Bishan or Woodleigh, areas that used to be cemeteries, turned into thriving towns with some of the highest PSS outside of the core central region. In short, the appreciation of condo prices was not just related to the limited supply. It was fueled by rising prosperity, smart urban planning, and a national culture that saw home ownership as both a goal as well as a mark of success. Our parents and relatives often told us that if we buy property early, we sure make money. But how much did they really make? Therefore, in order to understand why they still hold on to this belief, we now need to look at how private property and condos performed in the last few decades. Back then, the Singapore economy was booming, and government policies in general was very favourable towards home ownership. It wasn't uncommon to see double-digit GDP per capita growth, and this pushed up the property market. In 1995, the private non-landed resale index was around 75. You can think of this index as sort of like the average price of all the private condos. 30 years later, in 2025, it now stands at 270. That means that a $500,000 investment in 1995 would theoretically be now worth around $1.65 million. If you include compounding, that's around a 4.65 compounded annual growth rate. And that's basically your average yearly growth after factoring in the effects of compounding. Without it, the simple annual growth works out to be around 6.5%. And all this is even before considering leverage or taking up a housing loan. But of course, there were some downturns as well, such as during the Asian financial crisis in 1999, the global financial crisis in 2008, and more recently in 2013 when cooling measures like ABSD and TDSR slowed the market down. Yet the market has always bounced up after each downturn, even though it may take years to recover. And that's why in this channel we always talk about the importance of seeing real estate as a long-term investment and not a short-term speculation. Now back to the growth story, in order to understand how much real estate can really grow and why Singaporeans love to use it as their retirement, let's look at a specific example. For example, a 4-bedder at Novo in Yio Chu Kang is now transacting at around $1.92 million. Back then when it was launched in 2001, it was sold for around 580k. In this actual example, this translates to around 1.5 million in asset appreciation over the last 20 years. Despite all the ups and downs that we were talking about. All these examples built the mindset and perception that property prices would always go up. And for the earlier generations, this was largely true. But while Singapore's GDP per capita still grows year after year, our pace of growth, like many developed countries, has slowed compared to the past. And while the track record of private property looks impressive, we must also always remember that past performance is no guarantee of the future. The situation today is very different from what it was in the past. Prices are at a record high and growth has slowed. The government has also introduced more cooling measures, making it harder to own a private property. This includes things like ABSD on your second property, SSD and tighter loan limits. So flipping for a quick gain becomes much harder. On a bigger level, Singapore's population is aging. Fertility rates have dropped beyond levels of replacement, which means future demand growth could be weaker. And then there's also the opportunity cost, which not many people talk about. When most of your cash and CPF is tied up into your condo, you lose out on investments and opportunities that could compound faster, like equities, which also gives you more freedom without having to be tied to a 30-year mortgage. So while property may still appreciate, it is no longer the guaranteed ticket that it once was. But that does not mean that real estate is not a good investment. If you structure it right, plan your finances well, and know what you want to get out of your condo, it can still play a large part in your retirement plans. Yes, I've talked about many headwinds, but despite all that I've talked about, many Singaporeans are still choosing to rely on condos for their retirement. Yes, it's because of the fact that their funds are locked into their CPF, and it's also because of the fact that it has done well over the years. But there is also something very human that I haven't talked about yet that keeps us coming back to condos. And that's why the third reason Singaporeans use condos as their retirement is because these condos are tangible and easier to understand. You can see it, live in it, and it feels safe. Unlike stocks or funds that fluctuate daily, a home feels permanent and stable with less perceived volatility. Many people don't know how to value stocks, bonds, or ETFs. But everybody understands buying and selling a home. And that's why property naturally becomes a go-to investment for many everyday Singaporeans. Among the older generation, stocks are often viewed as a form of gambling, volatile, intangible, and hard to understand. Stories of people losing money reinforces this perception. So when faced with uncertainty, many in the older generation come back to the three things that they feel familiar with: fixed deposits, insurance, and real estate. But the reality is that in 2025, Fixed deposits and insurance are no longer the only two alternatives to real estate. Even with your CPF funds locked up, there are still many other alternatives worth exploring. Ones that are stable, with an equally strong track record, and offer more flexibility than a condo. Therefore, in order to understand why many everyday Singaporeans choose a condo as their retirement plan, and whether this thinking is outdated, we also need to now consider the other ways one can plan for retirement. Instead of seeing your real estate as your entire retirement plan, think of it as just one piece of the puzzle. You can still build a balanced portfolio. You can use property as a home and stable investment, but also grow your wealth through other channels like equities and ETFs. If your only asset is a condo, then logically speaking, the only way to really retire with it is to sell it and downgrade in the future. The question you should ask yourself is, would you be comfortable doing this later in your life? So instead of relying on it as your only option, you can think of it as just one of the options that you can consider. Broad-based, low-fee and diversified index funds like the S&P 500, which diversifies you across the top 500 companies in the US, have historically returned around 8 to 12% annually. Unlike a condo, you're not tied down to a mortgage and monthly installments. This freedom lets you explore different opportunities throughout your life, instead of feeling chained to a job just to pay off your loan. The question you're probably asking yourself is, yeah, but what's the real difference between investing in stocks and a condo? If you want a full breakdown of that, and if you want to see which could potentially make you more money, then check out my video linked in the description below. Condos have worked as a good retirement plan for the past generations, but the landscape has changed. In the past, everyday Singaporeans didn't know many other options that they could pursue, and real estate performed extremely well. Combined with our Asian mindset of valuing home ownership, property and condos became a natural fit. Some believe that prices would keep rising due to the limited land, while many others that I've spoken to think that the market is in a bubble due to the all-time high prices. In my view, certain parts of the market are definitely overhyped and overstretched, but there are some segments that still remain reasonably priced if you know where to look. Like everything else in life, there is no guarantee about the future. In my view, a condo still has a good place in your portfolio if you can afford it and if you are comfortable and aware with the trade-offs, which mainly comes down to picking the right unit as well as having less flexibility when compared to other options. With the rise of low-cost investments and increasing financial literacy, stocks and ETFs has also become extremely popular among our generation. And in my view, they present an equally good opportunity without the hassle of a mortgage. And historically, they've done very well as well, especially in the periods of low interest rates. If you'd like to understand how the trade-offs between stocks and real estate affects you specifically, or if you're thinking about how to best deploy your capital when you buy the next home, feel free to reach out for a chat. And if you found this video helpful, then check out my next video where I do an apple-to-apple comparison between stocks and real estate over a 15-year time horizon. As always, if you like this video, remember to like and subscribe.